maybe, just maybe, you're not actually in love with that man, you're in love with yourself. One of the most common questions that I see is, how do I get over a situationship? And two things. One, when we first meet someone, we are not meeting, you know, all of that person. We're meeting the best version of themselves. And not to say that there isn't truth in what that person is showing you, but at the same time, people tend to be on their best behavior at the beginning of a relationship, and it can be months before you start to see the less favorable sides of their personality. Because of that, we oftentimes assume that this person is completely great and their intentions are given the same intentions that we would have. So if someone is a little bit distant, a little bit quiet, we don't assume that they're not interested, or we don't assume that they're being manipulative. We assume that maybe they're just shy and reserved because that's how we would behave. Also, when we are in relationships, we tend to show ourselves better sides of ourselves. So we end up being better people in the relationship, and then we sometimes ascribe that to the person that we're with. So, for example, I can think of one situationship that I was in years ago, and I remember thinking that that guy was so funny and that I was constantly laughing when I was with him. Now, when I looked back at that situationship with, more logical and clear eyes, I realized that actually I was making myself laugh. I was entertaining myself because this guy never really talked that much. Unfortunately for me, before I entered that relationship, I had gone through a period where I lost a lot of friends. I wasn't dating. I was very lonely. So, all that time alone, I wasn't having as entertaining of a time. And when there was someone else that I could talk to, even though the conversation was one-sided, it was more entertaining and I was having a better time. It didn't take me that long after I got out of that situationship to realize that once I started getting around other people in general, I was having just as good of a time because I find myself funny. I find myself entertaining, and it got even better when I was with people who also engaged back equally and reciprocated. So, not to say that when you are in situationships that your feelings are not real. They are valid. And if you are getting out of a relationship or a situationship, you need to take the time to process that. I actually have a journal in my profile that is all about helping you heal from a breakup. At the same time, we do have to balance that processing with understanding that just because we were in the situationship, again, doesn't mean that we got to know the whole version of that person. And even if we did and that person was good, so often I see in relationships with some of my clients who are now married that before they met Mr. Right, they met a few Mr. Right nows who were good. Not necessarily anything wrong with these men, but at the same time, there was something lacking. There was some misalignment there, and it wasn't until they were able to let go of the man who was almost the guy, but not close enough, that they were finally able to meet someone who was truly aligned with what they wanted for their future.